Something happened this morning. Before you opened your eyes, before you checked your phone, before you said a single word, a thought arrived. You didn't choose it. You didn't invite it. It just appeared. And you probably don't even remember what it was. But here is what you need to understand. That thought, the very first one, set the tone for everything that followed. Every decision you made, every emotion you felt, every moment you either lived fully or sleepwalked through. It was shaped in those first few seconds after waking. And most people have no idea this is happening to them. Not once, not sometimes, every single day of their lives. There is an old story. Not many people have heard it, but the ones who do, they say it never quite leaves them. It settles somewhere behind the eyes, and it stays there. A long time ago, in a small village at the edge of a mountain range, there lived a young man. He was not unhappy, but he was not at peace either. He worked, he ate, he slept, he woke. And every morning, without fail, the first thing that appeared in his mind was a low, quiet dread. Not fear exactly, more like a weight, a heaviness that sat on his chest before his feet even touched the floor. He didn't know where it came from. He just knew it was always there. And because it was always there, he had stopped questioning it. He had come to believe, this is simply what mornings feel like. This is simply what life feels like. One day, a wandering teacher passed through the village. He was old, unhurried. He carried nothing except a small cloth bag and a stillness about him that made people feel both seen and invisible at the same time. The young man found himself sitting near the teacher one evening. He didn't plan to speak, but something in the silence made words rise. He said, "Every morning when I wake, there is something heavy already waiting for me. Before I do anything, before I think anything, it is just there." The teacher said nothing for a long time. Then he asked one question. "What is the first thing you reach for when you open your eyes?" The young man thought. He said, "I reach for what went wrong yesterday." The teacher nodded slowly. He said, "Then that is your day, right there, before it has even begun." The young man didn't fully understand. Not yet. The teacher continued. He said, "The mind in those first moments after sleep is like water that has just become still. It is clear, it is open, it is waiting, and whatever you pour into it first spreads through everything." He paused. If you pour in yesterday's wound, your entire day drinks from that wound. If you pour in tomorrow's fear, your entire day lives inside that fear. But if you learn, and this is rare, if you learn to pour in something else entirely. He stopped there. The young man waited. The teacher simply smiled and said nothing more. That night, the young man could not sleep. Not because he was anxious, but because something had shifted. A small thing, almost invisible, but real. He kept thinking about water becoming still. He kept thinking about what he poured into it. And he realized, for the first time in his adult life, that he had never once chosen the first thought of his day. He had simply inherited it from yesterday, from old pain, from old fear. And he had been drinking from that well every single morning, without ever questioning where the water came from. Now here is where I need you to stop. Because that young man, he is not the point. You are. Because right now, today, this morning when you woke up, what was waiting for you? Was it something heavy? Was it a problem that hasn't been solved? Was it a relationship that still feels unresolved? Was it a quiet anxiety that you can't quite name, but you feel it the moment consciousness returns? Most people would say yes, and most people would also say, that's just how mornings are. But that is not the truth. That is just what happens when you've never been shown anything different. Here is what Buddhism understood thousands of years ago and what modern science is only beginning to catch up to. The first few moments after waking are unlike any other moment in your day. During sleep, the mind releases its grip on identity, on story, on the accumulated weight of who you think you are and what you think your life means. And for a few brief seconds when you return to consciousness, before the stories rush back in, there is a gap, a pause, a space of pure awareness before thought. The Buddhist teachers called this the threshold, and they said, whoever controls the threshold controls the day. Not controls it like a dictator, but controls it like a gardener. The gardener doesn't force the plant. The gardener simply chooses what seeds go into the soil, and then steps back and lets nature do the rest. Your mind works the same way. Whatever seed you plant in those first waking moments, your mind will spend the rest of the day growing it, quietly, automatically, without your conscious involvement. If the seed is anxiety, your mind grows anxiety. It looks for evidence of things to worry about. It filters your entire day through that lens. Every conversation becomes a potential threat. Every silence becomes a possible rejection. Every problem confirms what you already suspected, that things are falling apart. If the seed is resentment, your mind grows resentment. It finds reasons to feel wronged. It replays old arguments. It turns small inconveniences into evidence of a deeper injustice. This is not weakness. This is not a flaw in your character. This is simply how the mind works. It is extraordinarily loyal to whatever it is handed first. And most of us hand it the heaviest thing we own before we even realize we're doing it. There was a monk once in a monastery near the Himalayas who was known for his extraordinary equanimity. Students would travel for weeks just to sit near him, not because he said remarkable things, but because being in his presence made people feel temporarily unburdened, like some invisible weight had been set down without them noticing. One student finally asked him directly, "What is your practice? What do you do that creates this quality?" The monk thought for a moment. He said, "Every morning before I open my eyes, I ask myself one question." The student leaned forward. The monk said, "I ask, who will I be today? Not what will I do, not what must I fix, not what am I afraid of. Simply, who will I be?" And then I stay in that question, not forcing an answer, just letting the question breathe. And somehow, by the time my eyes open, the answer has already arrived. The student asked, "What is the answer?" The monk smiled. He said, "It is always the same, present, available, here." The student was quiet for a long time, then said, "That sounds simple." The monk nodded. He said, "Yes, and that is why almost no one does it. We have been trained, deeply trained, to greet each day with an agenda, with a to-do list that starts before we're even vertical, with a mental review of everything that didn't get done yesterday, with a preview of everything that could go wrong tomorrow. And we call this being responsible. We call this being realistic. But what we are actually doing is handing our freshest, most open, most receptive mental state to our oldest, most exhausted, most unresolved problems. We are giving our best hours to our worst thoughts. And then we wonder why the day feels heavy before it's even begun. Here is something that may be difficult to hear. The tiredness you feel is not always physical. Sometimes it is the tiredness of a mind that has been solving the same problem since the moment it woke up. A problem it did not choose. A problem that was simply waiting for it the moment consciousness returned. And what makes this so invisible, so difficult to see, is that it happens before you are fully awake, before your capacity for critical thought has engaged, before you can ask, "Wait, Should I be thinking about this right now? The thought is already there, already spreading, already coloring the water. By the time you're fully conscious, the tone has been set, and you don't even know it happened. The ancient teachers of mindfulness understood something about the architecture of mind that most people in the modern world have never considered. They said the mind does not begin fresh each morning. It resumes, like a river that was briefly dammed during sleep and then released the moment you wake. And where does it resume? Exactly where it left off, with the same concerns, the same worries, the same unfinished emotional business. Unless something interrupts the resumption, unless something catches the mind in that gap between sleep and full waking and introduces something different, not something false, not toxic positivity, not a forced affirmation that feels hollow, but something true, something quiet, something that reminds the mind of what it actually is beneath all the accumulated weight of what it has been carrying. There is a teaching from the Zen tradition: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. People often misunderstand this. They think it means nothing changes, but that is not the lesson. The lesson is the actions are the same. The inner state is different. The wood gets chopped either way. The water gets carried either way. But in one case, the person doing it is present for it, and in the other case, they are somewhere else entirely, replaying yesterday, rehearsing tomorrow, carrying on an argument in their head with someone who isn't even in the room. The wood gets chopped, but they miss it. They miss the weight of the axe. They miss the smell of the split wood. They miss the satisfaction of the body doing something it was built to do. They miss the moment, and then the next moment, and then the next, until they look up one day and realize time has passed, life has moved, and they weren't quite there for it. This is the quiet tragedy that Buddhism was always trying to address, not the dramatic suffering, not the obvious pain, but the slow, invisible disappearance of a life that was being lived, just not inhabited, a body moving through days, but a mind somewhere else. And it all starts with that first thought, the one that arrived before you were ready, the one you didn't question, the one that set the water's color before you even opened your eyes. Now I want to be careful here, because this is not about blame. This is not about telling you that you've been doing mornings wrong. That framing misses the point entirely. You were never taught this. Nobody sat you down when you were young and said, listen carefully, what you think in the first 30 seconds of each day will quietly determine the quality of everything that follows. Nobody explained the threshold to you. Nobody told you about the still water. You were just thrown into each day the same way everyone around you was thrown into each day, carrying whatever was heaviest without any awareness that you were carrying it. This is not your failure. This is a gap in the education that the modern world offers. We learn mathematics. We learn history. We learn how to read financial statements and how to structure arguments and how to manage time, but we are almost never taught how to enter a day, how to cross the threshold from sleep to waking with intention, how to be the one who chooses what gets poured into the still water rather than the one who simply inherits whatever rises first. That teaching has been available for thousands of years in monasteries, in contemplative traditions, in the quiet writings of people who spent their lives studying the nature of mind, but it never made it into the mainstream because it is subtle, because it doesn't look impressive, because it happens in a moment so brief that most people don't even register it as a moment. But that moment, that threshold, is where your day is actually built, not in the office, not in the gym, not in the decisions you make at noon, in those first silent seconds before thought rushes back in, before identity reassembles, before the river resumes its flow, in that pause. That is where everything begins. And here is what changes when you understand this. Not your circumstances, not your problems, not the difficult people in your life or the genuine challenges you face. Those remain. The wood still needs chopping. The water still needs carrying. But something in how you meet the day begins to shift, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. But it shifts. The heaviness doesn't arrive quite so automatically. The dread doesn't settle in quite so completely. There is a moment, just a moment, where something quieter appears, not happiness exactly, not the absence of difficulty, but something steadier, something that was always there underneath the noise, something that the first thought of each day had been covering. And once you feel it, even once, you begin to understand what the monk meant. Present, available, here, not as a destination, not as something to achieve, but as what you already are when you stop drowning it out with the weight of yesterday. There is one more thing, something that the young man from the village eventually discovered after many mornings of practice, after many days of catching himself reaching automatically for the old heaviness and choosing just barely to put it down. He discovered something unexpected. The first thought didn't go away. It still appeared. Sometimes it was still heavy. Sometimes it still carried the residue of old pain. But he had changed his relationship to it. It was no longer the king. It was no longer the water. It was just a thought, one thought, passing through like weather. And he was the sky, not the storm, just the sky, wide enough to hold it without being consumed by it. That is what the Buddhist teachers were pointing at, not the elimination of difficult thoughts, not a mind wiped clean of all shadow, but a mind spacious enough, stable enough, present enough to let thoughts arise and pass without being swept away by them. And that quality, that spaciousness, begins to grow the moment you stop letting the first thought of the day set the tone for everything that follows without your awareness. The moment you step into the threshold consciously, even for a second, everything begins to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the way light changes when a cloud shifts. Gradual, quiet, and then suddenly obvious. Right now, as these words reach you, your mind is doing something. It is processing language. It is making meaning. It is quietly comparing what it is hearing to everything it has experienced before. And somewhere beneath all of that, there is still a you that is simply here. Before the labels, before the judgments, before the stories about what kind of day this will be, that version of you exists every morning, in that gap, in that threshold, for just a few seconds. Before thought resumes, before the river starts flowing again, and tomorrow morning, when you wake, you will have a choice you may never have noticed before. Not a dramatic choice, not a loud one, just a quiet one. The choice to pause, even for a breath, even for a moment, before you reach for yesterday, before you borrow from tomorrow, before you pour anything into the still water. Just pause and notice what is here, before thought, before weight, before the first story begins. Because in that pause, that is not nothing, that is everything. And it was there this morning, and it will be there tomorrow morning, and in every morning that follows, waiting, not for you to fix anything, not for you to be different, just waiting for you to notice it, before the noise begins, before the day takes over. In that still, open, unwritten moment, that is where you actually live. And even now, as this ends, another moment is passing. Did you feel it?